Good evening, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. It is July 3rd, the 4th of July Eve. I hope that you have wonderful plans for tomorrow if you're in America. Got the barbecue ready, the watermelon, the fireworks. I'm excited for this weekend. It's so nice that the 4th is on a Friday this year. So we have a 3-day weekend. If you're not in America, I hope you're celebrating somehow. And I just want to thank you for being here tonight. Maybe nobody's watching because everybody's busy pre-holiday. But I had to come on and do one last program this week following the interview with Vallow Daybell because of all of the questions you have sent. Some really good questions, some not so good questions. No question's a bad question, but I wanted to get to some of those. And plus, Rachel Smith is here, and she's actually in-house. She came to visit us in our studio. She's in town working on another trial, another case, but the Jeremy Best case, which she's on the prosecution team for, so she can't discuss that one. But it was nice to have her come in here, and many of you had questions about the Kohberger plea agreement that we discussed last night. Also, some questions about Daybell, so we'll kind of talk about that coming up here. Love to know where you're watching from. Of course, if you have any questions, shout out to Peggy, our moderator, who is going to town, keeping track of all of you and your comments and your questions. It was interesting to hear your thoughts last night about the Kohberger plea agreement. Seemed like a lot of you support it, are in favor of it, and then some of you are not. And that's kind of how the split seems to be with the with the families involved in the investigation, the families of the victims. That many of them are glad that this is just going to go away. Others wish that it could go to trial so that all of the evidence will come out. And one of the main questions I've received over the past 24 hours is what will happen if the trial, if it were to go to trial, now that it's not, is all of that evidence released? Will we hear all of that, everything that the witnesses were going to say? We won't. We won't. You hear much more in trial. They go much more in depth. The witnesses talk about what they've seen and witnessed. Now, it's possible that someone could potentially gather up all of the witnesses and interview them for like a docu-series or something, and they could share their stories. But chances are that's not going to happen because a lot of those witnesses don't even want to go anywhere near this or talk about it. You can't really blame them for that. And they want to get this behind them. So the sentencing for Kohberger, of course, is coming up on July 23rd. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the latest on Lori Vallow. She's filed a motion. This is a few days old now. I just haven't gotten a chance to come around and talk with you about it, for a new trial. She actually filed this back at the end of June 23rd. For several reasons. I put this on my Facebook page. I planned to discuss it with you all, but then she said she wanted to do an interview with me. So I kind of put this on the back burner. I'm going to not dive into this too deep, but basically she's saying that these are the reasons why she wants a new trial, that her Fourth Amendment violation for a medical evaluation. Remember how she was sick? She said on Friday, May 30th, the defendant became ill, vomiting at the lunch break. During jury selection after lunch break, the defendant informed the judge and state that her sickness, and her investigator had been out sick the day prior with the same symptoms. The court asked the defendant to stay for 10 minutes while he informs jurors and releases people with scheduling conflicts. The defendant was reluctant and did not want to vomit in front of the jury. However, the judge refused to dismiss her. The 10 minutes turned into 1.5 hours. Before being dismissed by the court, he advised the defendant to let the court know through her team before Monday if she was still sick. On Sunday, June 1st, the defendant was still sick and had her advisory counsel email the court to inform that she was still too sick with a virus and could not proceed on Monday, June 2nd. On Monday, June 2nd, the defendant was very sick and had advised the court in a timely manner. However, the court sent an order to the jail on June 2nd to have defendant brought to the court by any means necessary. Defendant could not walk from being weak and dehydrated, having vomited all weekend. The sheriff's office brought defendant to court in a wheelchair. Defendant then explained to the court she was too sick to represent herself and would not go forward. The court again asked the defendant to stay while he brought in potential jurors to explain and ordered her out of the wheelchair and into a regular chair. The defendant argued that the last time he said 10 minutes, which took over 1.5 hours, so he dismissed her prior to dismissing the jury. The defendant was then left in a wheelchair in a holding cell with no blanket, medicine, or hydration for 6 hours, waiting for transport back to the jail. On Monday, June 2nd, the court sent an order requesting that they medical evaluate her. She talked about the sidebar that was then held. This is all sorts of details in here. And she told the judge she was sick, but basically she's saying that he forced her to go to trial. And because of that, she deserves a new trial. Now, another reason she said she deserves a new trial is there was lack of impartiality. Again, she's blaming Judge Boreski for not being fair to her. Also, an abuse of discretion. She says that he did not release the jury from the admonition on the record. That is true. He did forget to do that. And also that he, all sorts of things about why she says he abused the record. And then she goes into argument. So because of all this, she's asking for a new trial. The state has not responded, at least as of right now, as of today. It's possible they have, they just haven't filed it yet, and I haven't seen it. The state asked for Lori's medical records and to see if she was sick. So this is what they said. She filed a motion and said, the state of Arizona, through undersigned counsel, requests that the court order Correctional Health Services release the defendant's medical records from Thursday, May 29th through June 12th to the state and the defendant. The defendant has filed a motion for a new trial. One of the defendant's allegations is a violation of her Fourth Amendment due to her allegedly being too sick to proceed with jury selection and or trial. Since the defendant has made the issue of her illness relevant in her motion for new trial, the state is requesting the court order that CHS provide copies of the defendant's medical records to the state and the defendant no later than July 11th to allow the parties time to review them and file any supplemental argument based upon those records. So we wait for that. The state will likely get her medical records. It's possible it could be under seal, as Lori and her team could argue that that's a HIPAA violation. Her health records could potentially be private. They could get those records, and then the state could respond to Lori Vallow Daybell's. Bottom line, is she going to get a new trial for all this? I would be stunned if she did. I think most of us would be stunned if she did. This is just her way of, asking for things to go her way. What will happen is she'll be sentenced at the end of the month on July 24th or 25th. I'm getting all my sentencing days mixed up. It'll be the 25th of July from 9 to noon in Maricopa County. And then after that, she'll likely file an appeal. And many of you are saying, well, when is she going to be brought back to Idaho? It will be after she's sentenced, likely, I would think, within 30 days. Now, it's possible they could do it super fast. When her trial ended in Boise, she was in Madison County the next day. Like, they moved her incredibly fast. And I don't know if this will take a little bit more planning and strategy because she's in another state and they're going state to state. But the jail in Maricopa will let her go, and she'll be back here in Idaho by the end of the summer, most likely. Well, with that, I do want to get to your questions. But before that, we have to go to my interview with Rachel Smith. A refresher, Rachel Smith is an experienced prosecutor who has done multiple death penalties over her career. She has prosecuted over 100 homicide cases. She is now a special prosecutor. She lives in Missouri, but she travels to multiple places all over the country to help with trials, as she did with the Lori Vallow trial and Chad Daybell trial up until it went to court. She was involved in that. She was in town. We had a chance to sit down, and I asked her many of the questions you have and many of the questions I have. So here is my interview with Rachel Smith. And here in our studio, special prosecutor Rachel Smith, who is actually in the flesh rather than on a video screen.
Thanks for having me.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
It's been a busy news week nationwide. Of course, the Diddy verdict and all that, but I want to start with Kohberger.
Yeah.
A lot of people are having questions about how a plea deal could come together so fast, just in a matter of days. I mean, really, 4 days ago, we were planning on a trial, and here we are now, we're planning on a sentencing date. How does that all happen?
Things like this are actually always in the back of mind of both sides. So there'll be lots of little conversations that are invisible to everybody. There'll be lots of conversations behind the scenes between the lead prosecutor and a member of the team, like, what would you guys think about? And it's kind of like test balloons. So it's very unlikely it just all happened. But what typically happens when this scenario occurs is the defense will have lost a series of motions, which we saw in Kohberger. His whole defense wasn't coming in. And the defendant at that point is like realizing he's at the end of the road. And so defense attorneys who have a good relationship with their client will say, look, is it okay for us to approach the prosecution with whatever the offer is? And if the defendant's ready and they've got him in that place, then they go to the state. The state will have been thinking about it all the way along. They may not have made the offer, but it's not something that they're going to just think of randomly. So then they'll hear it, they'll consider it, they'll talk to the family, and then they'll either accept or reject. And given the way the Kohberger case came down and the results came down, it's very likely the defendant heard his defense wasn't coming in. His attorneys are like, look, you're facing the death penalty. You have a shot of getting the rest of your life in prison, but at least you'll be alive. Let us go to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor looked at 25 or 30 years of litigation, a sure bet of a conviction, someone accepting responsibility, the victim getting to hear their, put forward their impact, and they accepted the offer.
So the reason, why not 2 years ago?
Right. Yeah.
Is it just try to work it? Because the defense now knows pretty much what they knew, well, maybe not 2 years ago because you learn evidence and stuff like that, but could they have not done this 2 years ago? Or is it something where the prosecutor says, no, hold out and see what we can get?
Why not 2 years ago? There's a lot of reasons why a plea in a case of this magnitude doesn't occur right away. One, the prosecutors are still building their case. The prosecutors are looking at the depth of which somebody planned the murder, the depth of which the motive, was the person targeted? Were there any other angles that would make this case stronger, better, or even more heinous? So the prosecutor might not even be ready. The second part of that is somebody who commits murder doesn't go into it planning on getting caught. They don't go into it planning on accepting responsibility. And it takes a while for a criminal defendant to accept responsibility. And candidly, it turns on that defense attorney's ability to access information, analyze the information, and develop a relationship with somebody who we already know doesn't follow society's rules. So that length of time really is a reflection of the time, to me, that the prosecutor worked their case and the defense worked understanding the discovery they had and developing a relationship with their client so that they trusted him. So when the defense attorney went to him and said, this is the best you're gonna do, he believed them.
Does the defense attorney ever go in on the first meeting with their client and say, did you do it?
I don't know of any. I did defense for about a year before I got to be a prosecutor. That was drilled into my head. What's your story? How do we explain this? I was taught, and I know my colleagues don't go in and say, did you do it? That's not the job of the defense attorney. The job of the defense attorney is not, did they do it? It's, we believe in this system. The government has an obligation to prove it. And the honorable defense attorneys, I know that's how they approach it. I don't know of anybody who walks in and go, tell me what you did or tell me if you did it. That's just not the way it works. It's, can the government prove what they're accusing you of? And can I get you the best result possible?
How much does the family, the feelings of the families, the victims, play into plea agreements?
The feelings, I can't think of anything short of the strength of the evidence that weighs more heavily on all the prosecutors I know, other than the victim's opinion and the victim's family opinion. It weighs extremely heavily. In the end, however, the buck stops with the prosecutor. You have to factor that in, and it's a major factor. It's not the only factor. You have to factor in your constituents, you have to factor in law enforcement, you have to factor in the strength of your case, and sadly, sometimes you have to factor in resources. In Idaho, given the level of appeal and the length of time capital cases take to get through the system, and then people aren't even facing the death penalty, any prosecutor's office is looking at a minimum of 20 years of appeals. Wow. And if somebody's going to accept responsibility, take the maximum punishment other than the death penalty, and essentially kill that appellate process, responsible prosecutors have to consider that.
Right, and if you've got 4 different families and 4 different victims, and 2 of them love it and 2 of them don't, or 3, I mean, it might be rare that you get all parties agreeing to whatever it is.
Absolutely. People process trauma and grief and harm in very different ways. And so, especially with multiple victims, it's not a democracy where people vote. In the end, the buck stops with the prosecutor, and they have to consider everybody's opinion, but then they make the best choice they can for the case and long term for their community and for the victims.
There's a bunch of viewer questions I want to get to, but before we do that, I'd love to hear your feedback on, or your thoughts about the Lori Vallow Daybell interview that I did with her a few days ago.
I love, when you talk to me after Lori's charges in Arizona, I said, I just want her to go away and I don't want to hear from her again. And I've thought about that, and I've decided that, when we heard on the news that you were going to get to talk to her, I was thrilled. Because there is a lot more that it would be nice to know. And I think, I thought you did a really good job of trying to nail her down. You didn't let her get sideways. I'm very grateful you didn't get on her boat. And if you're ever feeling the need to get on that boat, you know who to call, right?
So many people have told me the past 3 days, don't get on the boat, more than my entire life. Yeah.
Well, so anyway, but putting that aside, I really thought the interview was good. I suspect that you've laid a foundation of trust with her to the extent Lori trusts anybody. So I would love to be able to someday get somebody to get her to talk about, who else was involved. I would love to hear why, ultimately why. This prosecution had a theory, and it's very public what our theory was. I'm not divulging anything confidential. That it was money and sex and religion was a manipulation tool. But I think hearing that from her would be a really powerful thing. And I think you laid the foundation of that trust to try to get her to talk to you about that. So I was thrilled.
Do you hear anything surprising or different from her?
I did not. Not really. I did. I thought her denial of her knowing the kids were on the property was interesting. Do not believe that's true. She knew where those kids were, especially given the evidence we had about the text communication that came out at trial. And their travels both before and after.
Well, and the phone call that Chad made to her as they're searching, and she goes, they're searching the house rather than the property. All these things, of course, I thought of after when I could have pushed back, but you got to pick where to push back and where to just let it go.
Yeah, I was very happy that you got to interview her. I was initially in the camp of she needs to just go away. But I do think there's several unknown questions. And if somebody can get some of those answers, there's some real value there.
Have you heard of a prosecutor ever going to meet with a convicted killer after?
After they convicted the person, I have never heard of that. I think there's some pretty strict rules. Even if the rules no longer apply, most of the prosecutors I know
ethically would not.
Yeah. Even if it's not black letter rule, you will stay away from the gray.
Is it kind of like a judge talking about a case?
It is. Yeah, there are judges who sometimes can talk about things that are public record or how it impacted them personally. But most judges will just not even go there. Yeah. So, were Lori to ever reach out to Lindsay or Rob or any other of us on their team, I would be stunned if any of us ever talked to her, as much as we may want to.
I need to grab my phone. I left it over here so that we got several questions for you, and you might not know the answers to these, but, and I haven't even read them. It just says questions for Rachel. So here we go. I have a question for Rachel Smith. We all know we totally can't trust Lori on everything, but is there any truth to what she says about presenting a defense in a high-profile case? Is it really hard for someone who's accused to share their side of the story? Would love to hear your perspective.
In my experience, the judges in my world, both in Idaho and in Missouri and other places, bend over backwards to make sure the defendant gets their evidence in. They go out of their way to make sure that if there's opportunities for the defendant to get their evidence in, they let it in. So no, Lori's wrong. I think the challenge for somebody like Lori Vallow, they think they know the rules. They think they know the law. And so when the judge doesn't follow what they think they know, they immediately attribute it to the judge is cheating me. rather than taking that step back and going, I'm just wrong, right? And so had Lori followed the rules, or even closely followed the rules, the evidence that followed the rules, met the standards, I have zero doubt would have come in Arizona. Anything in Idaho, those of people who watched that trial against Lori in Idaho, if the defense wanted it in, laid the foundation, got it in, made the objection, the court typically went with them. And it wasn't, because he was skewed one way or another. It's just that the court is very mindful they have the right to appeal. So had Lori followed the rules, shouldn't even make basic deadlines, shouldn't even get things done on time. So shouldn't even come close to following any of the rules. So that is my long answer to, no, that is not my experience. Almost every judge I've been in front of bends over backwards to make sure that a defendant gets their day in court and gets to put the evidence that follows the rules in.
Okay, another question. My question for Ms. Smith is about Kohberger's plea agreement. The agreement is for consecutive life sentences instead of concurrent. A, what is the difference? And B, I'm wondering how common consecutive sentences are in a plea agreement.
Consecutive sentences are in a situation where somebody's truly doing life without opportunity of getting out. Consecutive sentences become symbolic.
Meaning one after the other after the other.
Yeah, meaning when the sentence is life, then life, then life, then life, if life really means they're staying there in prison, then it's really more symbolic in the sense of this person's life had value of it in itself. This person, the victim, this person's life had value of it in itself. So to be a little clearer, most judges will do a sentence for one victim, then run the next victim's case consecutive or after that, so that each victim has a sentence of their own. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
It's a layering on to reflect the individuality of who was taken or who was harmed. And as the prosecutor, I respect that because each victim deserves some stay. It is not unusual in cases of this nature with multiple victims, multiple harms done, that sentences are consecutive. Pragmatically, it probably doesn't mean more time, but it certainly means that each victim had a measure of justice that is their own.
Tara asks your thoughts on the plea deal, which we kind of talked about for Bryan Kohberger. And then Jim wants to know why Chad Daybell, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, didn't do something similar to what Kohberger's doing. Why couldn't he have waited until a few weeks before trial, cut a deal, and then serve life in prison rather than going to death row?
I'm not going to talk specifics about the behind the scenes of anything with Chad. There's a reason some of that stuff happens behind the scenes, and it's to protect everybody's rights. I will talk generally. Situations with people like Bryan Kohberger or people with multiple murders, those people don't go into it accepting responsibility. It is only after seeing the strength of the evidence, developing a good relationship with their defense attorney, that some people recognize that it is in their best interest to accept responsibility and take a plea. Only those people in that category do what Kohberger did. Now, I don't want to imply that's admirable. They shouldn't have done what they did to begin with, but they are in a category where they're willing to go, yeah, I did it, and it's in my best interest that I accept this deal. That's what it takes to get someone to end up with a deal like happened in Kohberger. If somebody doesn't have that mindset where they don't think it's in their best interest or they don't want to admit what they did, they don't want to accept verbally responsibility, then they don't accept those deals.
One of the other things that Lori said, and I've been asked about is, and I don't know if she said this during my interview, it's all a blur, or during court, that the defense has to show all their evidence to the prosecution beforehand and all their witnesses, and then the prosecution can say, no, we don't think that should be admitted or that should be admitted. Was that in the interview? I don't remember.
Yeah, she said something like that.
So That is clearly not 100% true, but how does that work? Can it be like in the movies where suddenly the defense creates this bombshell piece of evidence that the prosecutor doesn't know about and the judge doesn't know about, or does there need to be a little bit more of this is what we're going to admit in and why?
As much as TV is interesting and fun, that's no reality, right? Both sides, most states, both sides of the case, the state and the defense, have to disclose what they're going to do. There are rules, and most judges will make both sides follow the rules. Typically, the rules are the state has to disclose their stuff first, which gives the defense time to look at it, decide how they're going to respond, and then the defense has to respond. The challenge for some defense attorneys and some defendants is that their response may not be legal. They might want to do things that are against the law. So in a case where a defendant might want to accuse someone else, right? I call it, in my world, it's some other person did it. And so that defense, each state, Idaho in particular, has rules on when you can do that. Because you can't just go into court and say, I didn't do it, but Nate Eaton did, without some evidence to say that Nate Eaton was there, or his fingerprints were there, or his DNA was there, and he had a motive and an opportunity. So just saying that somebody happened to be in an area or have a cell phone hit isn't enough to blame them for murder, even in your own defense. So Lori Vallow, again, was wrong. Sadly, she once again is her own worst advocate. She misunderstood the law when she made that statement. She did not see that when she tried to put something forward that didn't follow the rule. She had a very experienced, very assertive, very competent prosecutor saying, Judge, this doesn't follow the law. It needs to be excluded. And that's the challenge with people who handle things on their own. They don't know how to disclose things properly. They don't know how to put things forward in a way that follows the rules, and they get treated like any other defense attorney. So Ms. Vallow is wrong. Defendants are allowed to put forward their defense, and a seasoned, good judge will make both sides follow the rules. And if they break the rules, then they don't get to do what they want to do.
And then in Lori's case, she'll file motion after motion to have the judge kicked off or for a new trial.
Right. Well, that's not unusual. I've had defense attorneys do that, right? So Lori made it much more personal than it needed to be, because she took it personal. And I understand she was the one facing serious consequences, but she made it personal. There was zero evidence that I saw from the parts of the trials I watched that suggests that judge was anything other than a seasoned member of the bench who followed the rules. There were several times he did what I don't think they would necessarily do. Should she have a defense attorney who's like, well, I'm going to caution the defendant about going forward with that. I want them to consider and perhaps talk to their advisory council about whether they want to go there. So this judge actually, I think, worked hard to make sure she got a fair trial, worked hard in the sense that he wanted to make sure she was aware of the rules. He gave her time to talk to her lawyers. So I think she took it very personal. Rather than admitting maybe she was wrong, it had to be the judge's fault.
Yeah. Well, Rachel Smith, thank you so much.
No
Anything
problem.
you want to
Thank
add?
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good job on her interview.
Well, thank you.
Again, my thanks to Rachel Smith, who's been a valuable asset in helping explain the law and helping us all answer questions that she can. Of course, she can't talk about everything, including those cases that she's been involved with, but it's good to have the expertise of a lawyer. Okay, I want to thank, before we get to your questions, newspapers.com. If you missed it last night, they've created a whole site as part of their site, and it's newspapers.com/Idaho Murders, and you can go on there and read all about the Kohberger case. But if you're not really into that, there's so many amazing things you can go on and research. And I got a message. I got to read you this one. This is from a viewer who sent me this after they got a newspapers.com subscription. They got one here, and let
Let me read you what she said. I've enjoyed listening to peoplesnewspapers.com stories, so I thought I'd share mine. I was using the site for genealogy research. In researching someone named William Reed in Franklin County, Pennsylvania, a news story came up that a person by this name was the last person to be hung at the gallows at the old jail in that county. He wasn't a match to anyone in my family, but it was fun to think for a moment that there was a connection, especially with my interest in true crime. I visited the old jail a couple of years ago and took a picture of the newspaper story and the actual stocks. That was Laura in Hawaii. And this was the photo she sent me. And she was able to find this on newspapers.com. 100th anniversary of the last hanging. William Reed hanged at 10:06 today. First man so to die in county in 33 years. And you know what I found? That the writing back then in the old days, so much more graphic or honest that you could say. You know, a lot of people say, oh, the news today is so graphic and bloody. Some of the stuff that they would say, like one was about so-and-so blew his brains out, another guy's brains out. It was quite graphic how they wrote it. Anyway, newspapers.com. If you have time this holiday weekend, go on and explore. If you use the newspapers.com/Nate, you get 20% off all of July. Your membership, you can sign up for the year and get 20% off that. Or you can just explore for 7 days. It's free. So thanks, newspapers.com. Let's go to your many, many questions. Cindy, Nate, great interview. You certainly asked the tough questions. Thank you. This isn't really a question, just a comment as to Tammy Daybell. Yes, the coroner originally claimed Tammy's death was due to natural causes. It's a shame in our country many coroners have no medical knowledge at all. There is a great documentary explaining the coroner versus medical examiner across the U.S. It can vary from county to county, let alone state to state. That is true. Some states have medical examiners who are trained doctors, professionals who go to medical school, who go to have training and extensive experience doing autopsies. Other states like Idaho have a coroner system where really anybody can run for coroner, and maybe you go to a class or two, and that's it. If I wanted to, I could run for coroner next election, even though I have no experience with it. Fremont County, Idaho, where the coroner originally was, they did declare Lori's death natural causes. The medical examiner in Utah months later then took a look at it and changed that. So that is how the system works. And yeah, it's a interesting system. And maybe one day all of the states will move more toward an ME type thing. Iris says, my question is, what movie did Lori want you to watch? I caught the arc. Lori is such a fast talker. She is a fast talker. She wanted me to watch Evan Almighty. It's about a reporter played by Steve Carell, a news anchor who leaves the anchor desk and becomes a politician and is called by God. God shows up one day and says, you need to build an ark and prepare for a flood. And Steve Carell resists, and all these things keep happening, like animals keep showing up 2 by 2, and he grows a beard, and all these things happening. And so he finally builds the ark. No one believes him. Nobody will get on the ship. They're making fun of him. They're mocking him. And then it starts to rain, and a dam breaks, and then everybody rushes to the ship. And so I guess Lori was saying that I need to be like that reporter, because she was saying, get on the boat. Nate, a couple questions. Is Lori still married to Chad? Absolutely. Number 2, would you consider Lori a narcissist? She seems very childlike and almost idiotic, nonsensible. Thank you, Nate. Well, let me look up the definition for narcissist. Personality qualities that include thinking very highly of oneself, needing admiration, believing others are inferior, and lacking empathy for others. Yeah, I would say she's a narcissist based on that definition. 4 common signs of a narcissist: entitlement, manipulative behavior. A narcissist initially aim to charm and amaze, yet consistently prioritize their own desires. They manipulate and control the conduct. Needing admiration, an unceasing craving for praise and admiration, leading to seeking validation through boasting and exaggeration. That sounds familiar. Lack of empathy. The individual struggles to understand or care about others' emotions, needs, and struggles, hindering their accountability for their actions. Yes, I think that Lori would fit that definition. Dawn, a couple questions I just asked that one. Sorry. Nate, please never interview her again. On X, I commended you for standing up to that disgusting human. It's clear she is
an attention-getting, lying, cheating, and disgraceful sinner. It's clear she wants to control you. Don't let her control you ever again. Yeah, thanks for your comment. I can see where you're coming from. I think that, yeah, she does have a lot of those characteristics. So thank you. Nicole and Dave, Nate, would you be arrested for slapping her across the face? I'm sure it crossed your mind. Um, I did. It actually did not cross my mind. But if I did, yes, I'd probably be arrested for assault, and it would be quite a news story. And I really don't want to go to jail. They could keep me there in that jail, I guess. But yeah, no, I didn't think about slapping her. I know when I confronted Chad and Lori in Hawaii, I had a lot of people that are like, dude, we thought Chad was going to punch you. We thought they were going to go after you. And I'm like, well, that would have been a better story because then we would have had it on video. They could have arrested him right there and held him. So anyway, next we have Kira. Should Lori finish her book or publish it? Can she profit off the sales of her telling the story of her crimes? Well, she can't. There's a Slayer law, and she's not allowed to profit off of her crimes in the state of Idaho. I don't know if Arizona has that. I believe they do. And I don't know a publisher who would take it. I guess she could technically self-publish. She could send the manuscript to someone and they could publish it, but I don't think she would make the money. Nate's, Lisa, this is from Lisa. Nate, I'm glad you did the interview. I just wish you would have pushed back more on the kids' burials. Was Chad there? Did she agree to have the kids killed and the adultery? I agree with you, Lisa. I wish I would have pushed back on that. I don't think we would have gotten an honest answer. At least she did say she wasn't there when the kids were buried. And I have a sense to believe that, but I don't know for sure. Was Chad there would have been a great question. And did she agree to have the kids killed? She said she didn't kill anyone and she was not involved in any of them. So I don't know what the answer would be. Hi, Nate. Watched your interview, partly excited to see what you would ask her. On the other hand, she doesn't deserve anything. She's a murderer and she thinks she's a Hollywood actress. When I saw the interview, I thought you'd be in control, but that wasn't the case. As usual, she thinks she's in control of everything. I love your shows. She just gets into the twisted mind that God used her to do this to feel good. All she did was not let you speak so she could say all the religious stuff so she could continue believing she was right. She was afraid, and you could see it in her face, that you wouldn't put her up against the wall. I'll follow your show. Success. Well, thank you. Yeah, there were times I thought I was in control most of the time. Obviously, there were things I would have done differently. And there was issues I wish I would have pushed back more on. And on the other hand, I wanted to get to a lot of topics. And so I wanted to kind of keep it moving. And, if it all depends. And yeah, I did let her say a lot of religious stuff. You can see why Dateline cut a lot of the interview out because it was probably a lot of the similar stuff. But on the other hand, you got to see who she was. We got to see who she was unfiltered for 40 minutes. Theodora, interesting interview. She overpowered you. Can you set ground rules if there is another interview? We will never get the truth out of her. I think you're right on the last statement. We will never get the truth out of her. Ground rules. Yeah, I could. Now that I've had the one interview. If she's like, Nate, come back, I could say, I will only come back if this, and this happen. And we'll see what she says. She's obviously going to want ground rules too. And if I don't agree to them, she could call another reporter. That's kind of her prerogative. Once she gets to Idaho, though, in a few weeks, there's no cameras in the prisons here, and that the allure could wear off. Kathy, why did you let her run the interview? Horrible. How could you let her control the entire narrative? I don't think I did. I don't think I let her control the entire narrative. Run her mouth so long with so much BS. My gosh, you let her control the entire narrative, which was so full of bull. I'm really disappointed she got to spew her ridiculous story for so long. She's ridiculous and full of it. Thank you, Kathy. I don't think I let her control the entire narrative. Otherwise, I just would have let her talk. I had to cut her off multiple times. I had to change the topic multiple times. She came with me. If you were to count up the minutes, and I have not done this, out of the 40 minutes, I think that you would see that we covered a variety of topics. Had I let her control the narrative, we would have spent 10 minutes talking about her birthday. We would have spent the rest of the time talking about God and Jesus. That's all it would have been. And we didn't do that. Chris, what value does she bring to you in your interview? By the way, Nate, you're a big fan of mine and still are. Well, thank you. You're a big fan of mine and still are. Well, thanks. I wonder if you meant I'm a big fan of yours. But I am a big fan of you too. So thank you. What the value? The value for this interview, I would argue, is one, we could show you who Lori Vallow is. We saw her for 40 minutes. You could argue we saw it in court. That's different. Two, no one has ever been able, well, I shouldn't say no one. A few people, very few people have been able to sit and truly ask her the questions and see how she responds. Is there value by putting her on here every night? No, unless she comes out and confesses and it's true. But there is value somewhat in seeing it. Some of you will say there is absolutely no value. I get what you're saying. I can understand your viewpoint. I would disagree. I would say that there is value in it. It wasn't to get a ton of viewers. It wasn't to make $1 million. Someone said, we're not making $1 million. I'd love, we're not making $1 million. I can tell you that. News does not make money. If I wanted to just solely make a ton of money, I wouldn't have gone into news. My first year as a reporter, I made $18,500 my first year on TV, $8.89 an hour. My second year, I got $1,000 raise. There's not the media. There's not much money. I digress. Anyway, so yeah, I think that there was some value in it. I've had multiple people email me saying thank you for showing this, because I know a person who's following a person who has character traits like Lori, and I'm worried. And I can show them the interview and say, the person you're following is just like her. So I hope that somewhere out there, someone may have seen this and been like, yeah, I have a close person in my life who messaged me and said something very similar about how they saw this interview and they realized that how horrible it is to be surrounded by a narcissist. Amy, you mentioned the PIO a few times. What is the PIO? My apologies. I should have clarified that. PIO stands for Public Information Officer. They're normally the people who work with the media. They arrange interviews when there's breaking news. We call it PIO. It's someone that deals with the press, that is kind of the go-between between like the officers and the media. So the PIO is the one that helped arranged it. And a lot of people leave news and become PIOs. Rosemary, did you feel the need to take a shower immediately after you were finished interviewing her? More importantly, did you catch that she said, Alex never told me where they put them? That's an admission. Yes, I did catch that Alex said that they were in a safe place. Did I need to take a shower? I did take a shower, and so did Jordan and Erica, because I just felt dirty in the jail. I'm kind of a clean freak. Like I kind of like stuff clean. So I just felt dirty in there, and I did take a shower. How did you feel before, during, and after the interview? Anything changed from your perspective? Oh, that's a big question. Before, I was nervous. I didn't know where it was going to go. I felt I was prepared, but I knew I could never be fully prepared. During the interview, I felt, I finally felt comfortable maybe 15, 20 minutes into it, and felt that I could really, this is the first time Lori and I have actually physically spoken. We've texted, but we've never spoken. And so if I were to do it now, after our first interview, I could go on and be like, all right, I'll be much more, firm. And after, I was relieved that it was done. And I felt good about it. I mean, not great, but good. Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a 6 or a 7. Nate, do you have an impression that she really believes all she says, or is she just an incredible liar? I think both. I don't know if she believes all she says. I don't think she believes it all. I think she makes it up, but I think she does believe a lot. I'm LDS. It makes me physically sick to listen to her invoke the LDS church and its teachings. She is pure evil. I had a lot of people email me that, saying the same thing, that a lot of what she was saying was not familiar to people that go to church every Sunday at the LDS church. And they hadn't heard these things, and they were upset that she, mentioned that. Who or what does she keep looking to at her left? She was looking at her private investigator, Jeff. Nancy Grace told me yesterday that people look away when they lie. So she thinks she kept looking away because she was lying. But that's who she was looking at. With all due respect, Nate, and I am a big fan of yours, can you not see how she had control of you during the interview? That's from Chris. I don't know if she had control of me. I wasn't sucked in, but maybe it appears that way, that she did have control of it. She definitely is a very domineering personality and wants it her way. What have you learned from the whole saga? Adrian says, you've done such amazing work. Thank you, Adrian. Gosh, I could do a whole Courtroom Insider on what I've learned. One of the things I've learned is that everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a strong opinion. I've also learned about this is a story that for every day for 5 years we could have reported something. There's just so much sensational stuff about it. And we reported a lot of it, but a lot of it we didn't touch on because it was just, it was just crazy. And I've learned too that there are vulnerable people out there that get sucked into personalities like Lori. I don't know about Chad. That's the weird thing, though. But Lori, I could see. There's a lot. Let me think about that. Nate, Kim says, Nate, how did you keep a straight face while interviewing that nut? I hope this is the last interview anyone does with her. She's evil and a liar. It's hard for me to keep a straight face. Ask my wife. I get a smirk. If you say something ridiculous to me, I'm going to be like, really? Come on. I tend to be a little sarcastic back. I knew I couldn't do that with her. I didn't want it to appear. I did smile when she walked in. I'm a natural smiler. I smile at people. And I really had to kind of keep that in mind, not to smirk. And I think it helped having my wife in the room. Why does Lori still have a paralegal and her investigator now that the trial is over? They are still working with her until she's sentenced. That's Lisa Ann. Liz Ann, sorry. Carrie Ann, I wish you could have asked her about the portal. If she could meet with Chad like she used to claim in her closet in her home, if she can do that from her cell. That is a question I had on my list, Carrie Ann. I just didn't get a chance to ask it. I wish I would have. Also, what was the box of things she carried in the room and set on the table? That was all of her notes. She used to bring that to court every day. She'd bring in a stack of documents, and I didn't know if she was going to bring it out to talk to me about. But after she met with me, she met with her paralegal and with Jeff, her investigator. So, yeah, it's possible that she just held on to those things just to go meet with them. Does anyone visit her in prison? No, she can't have visitors. All visits are done on the app. Does she communicate with creepy sociopath Chad? She said no. Why did Lori want you as a witness in her Arizona trial? Did you get any clarity? I was going to ask her that, but she kind of answered that in court, how she wanted me as a witness to impeach other witnesses, because I've interviewed a lot of people associated with the case, but not in Arizona, which was kind of the weird thing. I haven't interviewed many people in Arizona, but she claimed I had. So she wanted to call me to rebut what they might say. The judge made a point that can't you just show the clips? Can't you just show the videos if that's what you're going to do? So, yeah. How flirty did she get with you in beginning the texting relationship? Did she try in her own narcissistic way to charm you? Davey says. I don't know. I don't know if she charmed me. She never asked me for money. She never asked me for anything. She did ask me for music recommendations. She did ask me for movie recommendations. And we chatted. I mean, she was very friendly, maybe flirtatious. I guess you could read it that way. I didn't at all go that way with her. Although one of you emailed me and said, quit your obsession with Lori Daybell and quit giving her M&Ms or something. By the way, she did not get to take the M&Ms. The M&Ms sat out there the entire interview and she looked at them, but she didn't take them. Hi, Nate. I have to ask, this is from Sue. Are you writing a book? If so, release date. I live in Nevada, and after all these years, I watch Secret Santa every year. It's heartwarming, and I'm tearful at the amazing love for both the givers and the deserving recipients. Many blessings. Thank you, Sue. That's nice. We're getting ready for Secret Santa here in a few months. I cannot believe it. Am I writing a book? Oh, probably not. I don't know. What do you think? I've had many people ask. It sounds so tiring. I write for my job every day. So some people like to write to escape and like for fun and stuff. And that used to be me. But like when I get home, I don't want to think about writing. But I don't know. Maybe I will write a book. I mean, I have some topics in my mind, but I don't think anybody would read it, to be honest with you. Jill says, is the interview with Lori one of the most frustrating you've ever conducted? Yes, without a doubt. Probably number one. I'm trying to think. What else? I don't think I've ever been, frustrated. That's an interesting word. Challenging, you could say. And so high profile. No one has ever watched another interview I've done as many times as this. And I wanted to be sure that I did it right and did it fair and was just to all parties. And I wasn't. I know I messed up on some of the things, but would I change anything? I'd change a few things, but ultimately I'm okay with it. I'm from Germany. I'm wondering if you could do a story on what goes on to a court's decision to declare someone competent for trial. Bottom line is there's just two things. You have to understand the charges against you, and you have to be able to assist in your defense. That's it. Lori did both of those things. She knew what she was doing, and that was that. Amanda from Scotland. I'll get a couple more in here. Just wanted to send you a message of support. I can completely understand why you did the interview with Lori. It's just a pity it was so short, which I know was out of your control. I'd love to see you interview Chad if you reached out to him. I would be happy to interview Chad. I think the dynamic with Chad would be completely different than Lori. I wouldn't get a camera in. He's on death row. They're not going to let a camera in for that. I might be able to interview him on the phone or on a video chat. And Chad is not going to be as giggly, as bubbly, as, flirtatious, if that's what you want to call it, as Lori was. So, yeah, I'd be happy to. And thanks for your kind message. I appreciate that. Is she writing a book? Is she allowed to write a book from prison? She says she's writing a book. She can write it. I don't know if it's going to get published or if it's going to be everywhere. According to her, it will be everywhere. I'm so curious. This is, why don't we do two more? Marcy, I'm so curious if Lori knew your wife was there, and if so, did she show a visible reaction or made any comments about her being there? I've always felt like Lori had been dying to try and, quote, win Nate over with her feminine narcissism. That really, quote, crashed her party if she knew your wife was there. She knew Erica was there. I did not say, this is my wife, Erica. I debated introducing her as my wife. I debated introducing Jordan as my cameraman. I wasn't going to introduce either of them simply because we were on a time crunch. But after her paralegal came in and we needed to reset the shot and everything, we had a minute to kill time. And so that's why I introduced them. And I didn't say, this is my wife. And Erica, she didn't really care either way if it was wife or not, but maybe I should have. I don't see Lori as trying to charm me or win me over other than in a religious aspect, not a romantic aspect. But I don't know. I have no idea. Amanda, final question. Are you planning to keep in touch with Lori long-term, or will you end communication with her at some point? I do not see me and Lori being lifelong pen pals. I have not heard from Lori since the interview. I did send her a message thanking her for talking with me, asking if she had any questions, and I haven't heard from her, and it's been over a week, which is kind of unusual, but not really. And that's, how it could be. She could be furious at how it turned out, and I might never hear from her again, or she could message me in 5 minutes and say, hey, sorry, my tablet broke. As far as keeping in touch with her, I don't know. I really don't. I am curious about the fact that she said it's not going to be 20 or 30 years. I promise you that. I will prophecy of that. She said something like that, to follow up every year on her birthday and be like, Lori, it's been year 1, year 2, but we'll see. I don't know. I haven't thought much about it. I'm not, dying to keep in touch with her. Some people are, I guess. Some people really want to get a hold of her. Anyway, I thank you for watching. I've really enjoyed you being with us every night this week for Courtroom Insider, for supporting East Idaho News, for buying our shirts, for sending nice words, for sending mean words. I've gotten so much hate mail this week. I have more than ever before, but I've gotten so many nice comments. And I got to tell you, there's times I tell Erica, I'm just going to leave this job and go sell cookies, because then everybody's happy. And she says, no, because you'll burn some and then people will be mad. And she's right. But there are times where, I'll tell you one day, right before this case broke in September of 2019, I was ready to call news quits. But then something good happens. Like last night, there's a street near our house. Every 4th of July, they have a big party. One house gets out hot dogs. One house gets out snow cones. One house gets out popcorn, ice cream bars, watermelon, bottled water. It's a circle. It's a cul-de-sac. And they light fireworks off all night. And we don't live on that street, but they've invited us, and people from other streets show up. And it's just the funnest thing. And we used to go every year, and we haven't gone in several years. But last night, Erica's like, do you want to go with the kids? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I'll go for a minute. I won't stay long. And we went, and we ended up staying like 2 or 3 hours. It was a lot of fun. And the highlight of the night for me was seeing little Kaio Doxy. Back in 2017, I met Kaio when he was this small, the size of a Coke can. He was born at 24 weeks, 11 inches long, like 438 grams. And I went to the hospital and interviewed his parents and did a story. And that story ended up winning me a big national award, which wasn't the reason why I did it. And I don't say that to brag, but it's a story I've never forgotten. A year later, I followed up when Kaio turned 1. They moved away first to Boise and then to California. And we're at this neighborhood party. Haven't, really heard from his family in years.
and I see his parents. They're there. They're back in town for a family reunion. And I went over and I said, "Where's Kaio?" And they went and got him. And he came out and we took this photo. Cutest little boy. He told me all about how he's turning 8. He turns 8 this week, and he's having a Minecraft party. And I said, "You know that I did a story on you. I put you on the news," and I showed it. He wanted to watch the video. I didn't show him the video, but I showed him the photos, and he was the sweetest kid. He gave me a big hug, and it was so amazing to see him 7 years later, to see, well, 8 years later now, actually, to see baby Kaio doing well. So that was the highlight of my week. After the craziness that I experienced in Maricopa County in the jail, I got to see baby Kaio, now big boy Kaio, surrounded by fireworks and snow cones and popcorn and hot dogs. And I hope that many of you have those delicious foods this weekend as we have the 4th of July. Obviously, I won't be here tomorrow. We'll be off celebrating fireworks, doing helicopter rides on the East Idaho News chopper. If you're at Riverfest, come and say hello. And we'll be back next Thursday for another edition of Courtroom Insider, talking about the Dior Coons case. It's been 10 years since he vanished. I'll let you know if there's any new developments and what is happening with that. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy 4th. I'm Nate Eaton. Take care.